all I've been reading about today was Australia Post ending postal shipments to the US. This Week in E-Commerce, episode 102. I am Mal Chia, back with you for another week with Alex Ross. Alex, how are you?
I am well.
Are you really well? We just talked about this. You are amongst the walking wounded because I've had the flu for like the last week. It is crazy the number of people who are sick. I've messaged a bunch of people today and they have also been sick.
Yeah, and they're probably all the people were at the same event that you were last week or something.
Yeah, probably. Well, I didn't leave the house last week.
Yeah.
But there was no way we weren't going to record this week because, oh my God, today has turned into quite the day. If anyone, it is Tuesday, 26th of August, and all I've been reading about today and all last night as well was Australia Post ending postal shipments to the US.
Yeah, huge news. I think we got sneak peeks of it last night and then woke up to a lot of news on it this morning.
Yeah, but before we get into that, we have a lot more to cover because yet again, it has been a very, very, very busy week. And thank you, Alex, for actually researching all this week because I have been in no state to do so. So let's dive straight into it. Now, our first story is Jones Family Business / the Kitchen Things have entered receivership in New Zealand.
Yeah, I was really sad to see this one. I know some of their team, great team, and I thought this was interesting off the back of our conversation last episode around JB Hi-Fi and that kind of consumer goods piece. I know that Australia's economy has been tough this year, but we know New Zealand's have been tougher. So the result of that, it looks.
Yeah, and look, I think part of it is like because the population in New Zealand, it is such a small population, they find it really hard to sustain this. I think the whole population in New Zealand is like only a few million people. So when you have that and you don't have that demand to be able to sustain, this sort of business, yeah, it makes it really hard, especially.
Yeah, especially when the type of product that they're selling, it just comes down to price, right? And having big players in the market, it's a family business. They need to hold strong in some regard. So yeah, how does one compete in the super good space? I don't know.
Yeah, look, I think you have to export, and it's really hard, I think, for those New Zealand businesses who only operate in New Zealand to be able to kind of weather the storm. And you've seen a lot of businesses over there either close down or have to expand, such as, with Flora and Fauna coming into here and expanding that way in order to be able to continue to grow or survive in this market. To just be able to survive just in New Zealand alone, I think it's very, very hard.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting as well, this wasn't just an online business, as a family business as well, but they had, I think it was 6 stores across New Zealand. So they had that physical presence as well, which always hurts when it comes to the bottom line, and having those overheads probably paid a bit into it, just not being able to move quick enough.
Yep. Now, Melbourne is fast becoming the retail mecca of Australia, pardon the pun, because all the big stores keep opening up like their new flagship stores in Melbourne, whether it be Pop Mart opening theirs recently, there's a Lego store opening there as well. Rod and Gun have now opened their global flagship store in Melbourne on Collins Street.
Must be the place to be, and potentially there's better pockets in Melbourne. Maybe that plays into it as well. But yeah, super exciting. And off the back of Mecca's investment in that brick and mortar space, I think we're just seeing a lot more brands invest in that flagship store.
Yeah, I think especially a few weeks ago, we talked about Country Road pulling out of Sydney and pulling out of New South Wales, but still focusing on Victoria. Yeah, it really has to be said for something about the disposable income in each state, where it appears that, people are still just spending more because they have more disposable income in Victoria potentially.
Yeah. And look, I know that this podcast is this week in e-commerce, but I think physical retail plays a massive part in that strategy and that piece as well. So it's interesting just to see where these brands are investing, and it seems to be stores in Melbourne.
Yeah, look, and Melbourne is a beautiful, beautiful city. I saw John Cena yesterday with a video talking about the Melbourne coffee culture, saying that it's the best in the world, which, I can't really argue with. Even as a proud South Australian, Melbourne has some really, really good coffees.
Look, we'll let them have that because if we didn't, we would hear about it anyway, right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, moving on to our next quick one is that we have Adore Beauty recently had announced their financial year results, showing that they had a 67.8% increase in their EBITDA, up to $8.1 million for the year, with margins of 4.1% and gross margins up by 35.3, up to 35.3%.
Yeah. I mean, look, when I was just researching for this episode, there's a lot of news around a lot of companies' financial year records, right? So we're seeing that come out this week on how people are performing. And Adore Beauty was a highlight for me. I think growth, but also growth in their newly acquired customers. I think that was up maybe, I think it was 4.6% from memory. So that's really promising, right? They're still attracting new clientele, particularly for Adore Beauty in a really busy competitive space.
And like you said before, they are also focusing on opening the retail stores as well, because in the last 12 months, they've opened 4 retail stores. So 3 Adore Beauties plus 1 from Iku, which is the brand which they acquired. And they also have another 3 currently under construction and another 5 which are under lease to set to open in the first half of FY26. So like other brands which we've been talking about, whether it be Rod and Gun, but also Oz Hair and Beauty as well, really focusing on that physical store as well to complement the online presence.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another reason why this story kind of piqued my interest. They've opening stores, they're continuing to invest in that play. And I think off the back of, Mecca's massive flagship store, people want to go in, look at these products, get advice, smell them, touch them. So they're opening that up.
Yeah, and I think people are looking for experiences as well. There's so much research now showing that younger generations, like Gen Zs in particular, are now eschewing online only and really trying to seek out those physical in-person experiences and are genuinely looking for community and connection. God, I just used a whole lot of buzzwords there. But people are now looking for that because they're sick of just interacting online, and having these beautiful stores where people can go and experience it, speak to people, is really what people seem to be looking for nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. My big question is, do you still get Tim Tams with your in-store order as well as online? Speaking to the CTO of Adore at online retailer this year, I won't drop the number, but the number they spend on Tim Tams is absolutely phenomenal. But it's a key point of difference. And every time people talk about ordering Adore online, they love that little sweet treat at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was working at Uber, it was mandatory for any Australian team members going to Uber HQ in San Francisco, you had to bring Tim Tams. If you did not bring Tim Tams, your name was mud. Like people would just be like, "Oh, why didn't you bring Tim Tams?" Because
Tim
people just
Tams,
expect it. Yeah,
yeah.
they just expect it. There's someone from Australia coming this week. Fantastic. There's going to be Tim Tams in the kitchen. And if there weren't, it'd be like, "Hang on, aren't you the Aussie? Aren't you the Aussie? Like, where are the Tim Tams?" All right, and our last quick story is Nobbies have scored quite a win because they have become the official supplier for the Australian Olympic team's underwear. Now, this is a really, really cool story, I thought.
Yeah, 100%. I got excited. I mean, it's the Australian Olympic team, so great to have Australian businesses, and that's what they're looking for. But massive leap for the brand and kind of that recognition credibility piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And also following in the steps of July as well, who very famously did the Australian Olympic team's luggage a couple of years back. And that was something which became really, really iconic, something which became super, super desirable as well. And when you saw that, when you see them going through, the security at the airports, it always gets people's attention. So I think this is also really cool. Although you're probably not going to see this walking through an airport, it still says something, that your brand is associated with something like the Olympics. But then also great to see the Olympic team as well, supporting growing brands rather than supporting established brands, really focusing on how do we actually continue to nurture and invest in and help support the next generation of retail brands.
Yeah, I think that's what it is about, right? At the Evocative Growth Summit last week in Melbourne, I was there, and the CTO of July, Lockie, was talking about how when they scored that initial Olympic team supplier, official partner, huge move for their brand in, again, that credibility piece, bringing it to the dining table, really.
And look, well done to Rob and the team there. Rob's a fantastic operator, just a lovely, lovely guy too. So really excited to and really happy for the success. And I'm looking forward to seeing what these actually look like, and if the general public are going to be able to get their hands on a pair.
Yes, well, and that's it. And that's the collab piece, and having this limited edition, making it available to the public in that short supply, getting around that event. It's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we're going to get into the first big story, and it is a doozy in that Australia Post, as we talked about at the top of the show, have halted all parcel postage into the US off the back of the craziness, which is the Trump tariffs and the end of de minimis. So de minimis ends on August 29th, as we've talked about previously. So to preempt that, Australia Post has now halted all shipments to the US and Puerto Rico, as well as a bunch of other countries from today, the 26th of August, to ensure that no one gets caught up in that. This is such a huge move and something which happened very, very suddenly, Alex. What's been the feedback you've been hearing over the last 24 hours?
Look, I've had a few calls this morning with brands and I asked them about this. None are personally affected. They already had warehouses set up and things like that. But it's definitely a shock. And I think I was trying to rack my brain off the conversation that we had with Justin. I was like, was this discussed then? Is this, or has AusPost just kind of pulled the rug underneath everybody as of today, which seems like they have?
Look, it feels like they have, and look, I don't blame AusPost for it because it is a reaction, and the fact is that they're not the only country which has done this. The list of countries which have done the same, whether it be France, Germany, Singapore, there's at least a dozen countries on there who've also halted shipments to the US because of the uncertainty around the environment. They don't know how things are going to be processed. They don't know how duties and tariffs are going to be collected, and the national carriers at the moment aren't actually set up for that. They were never set up for that, to be able to have that commercial aspect. Now, the thing to remember as well is that the commercial clearance model, which Australia Post does operate, and DHL, UPS, and other carriers operate as well, that still is underway because that is set up to collect all those codes to be able to properly calculate duties and tariffs. That's all still going to go through. But there's so many retailers, particularly the smaller ones, who are just getting started, who do rely on just standard AusPost to be able to ship to the US. And this is it's a big change. It's a big change for them. And it's going to have a significant impact on their business when you consider that for the next 6 months, the tariff regime, until they properly figure it out, means that every parcel is going to be charged a minimum of $80 to $200 USD.
Is that how significant the tariffs are going to be?
For the next 6 months until they figure it out. And then after that, after 6 months, then they'll introduce what the proper scheme will be. But until then, though, it's either ranges just from 80 to 200, depending on what your product is and what the HTS codes are and all this other stuff.
Yeah, right. Look, it's really complicated. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around it and I'm not even close. So I can't imagine for brands that have so much going on that have to make really big decisions really quickly. What's your advice?
Look, same as Justin. It's like you've got a couple of things. Like one thing is that you need to find someone else fast. Until Australia Post is able to actually, offer this again and restart shipping to the US through the regular postage network. You got to find something else, which means you either need to switch to the commercial clearance model, or you need to move to someone like a Shipit or someone like that who can provide this for you. Or if you're using a DHL, then you're already fine. So that's like a short-term fix. But even then, that'll take a little while to get up and running. But then post that, you then need to decide what's going to be best for your business as well. Because even at $80, and if you I think $80 is like maybe the peak it'll be, and maybe it'll go down to 50, 30, who knows? That's still a significant hit. And you got to think that the US consumer is not going to be willing to pay that. So you need to figure out how can you get it into the US, or how can you make sure that you absorb as much of that or as possible for the US customer, which means you need to be looking at 3PL. You need to be looking at actually landing goods into the US and selling it from there. The other alternative is something like a global E, where you can actually just essentially transfer it from your Australian entity to your US entity and just pay the tariff on the cogs of the product.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. I think off the back of that advice as well is talk to people that know what they're talking about, talking to other brands, making sure that you're educated on this space. I did see after all of this news dropped, there was an article about 2-3 days earlier. AusPost are gearing up for Black Friday. They're investing in their staff off the back of that e-commerce effort. We know that AusPost cares a lot about the Australian e-commerce community and environment. So I know that they'll be working really quickly to try and find a solution as well.
Yeah, I've no doubt, and I think they've partnered with Zonos. So they've announced today that they have a partnership with Zonos to come up with a solution which will allow people to use the regular AusPost shipping to send goods into the US. But that's probably going to take some time. That's not an immediate fix. So I think there is going to be an impact from there. Obviously, with brands who are going to be unable to sell into the US. So, a lot of brands, I work with a lot of brands who are kind of in this predicament now, who unfortunately, because they weren't getting the clear signals from AusPost, didn't make a decision fast enough. So now are having to really, really scramble for that. Whereas other brands who I work with who were actually from the start were wanting to be proactive, they kind of protected themselves to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, look, so I think there's a lot to consider here. It's something which is going to be changing every single day, I think. Look, I also hats off as well to Dean Salakis and Jethro Marks, who in their retail community WhatsApp group, there is a cross-border chat, which has been fantastic in terms of the support and advice which retailers have been sharing amongst each other, as well as some of the providers as well. Good thing is no one's really going in there spruiking their products. They're just really just trying to give really honest, transparent advice. Justin Irvine, obviously being a real champion in this space. There are a lot of great voices, so make sure that you are listening to these guys and following what they have to say, because some of it, even Justin was very early with a lot of his advice, and it's all come out to be true, I think, from everything Justin said. And he was saying this for like 6 months ago,
Yeah.
but it's now all coming to pass. Even though it may not have happened then, it's definitely happening now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like echoing that WhatsApp community, really fantastic to see the Australian retailers supporting each other and getting that advice there too.
Yep. All right. Moving on to our next story, we've got Rachel Wild, who's formerly from Naked Sunday and co-founder of the Breakout Hack, so formerly known as TBH Skincare, has recently partnered up with Sydney Mini Garage for a pretty awesome partnership.
Yeah, I thought this was really cool. So, skincare brand, growing Australian business, teaming up with Mini Cooper, massive established brand, but doing it in a way that it feels really genuine and really aligned.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have these sort of things where, it's a little bit unexpected. Like when you do things that are expected, people don't really pay attention because, hey, hang on, okay, that makes sense. They'll move on. But it's those little crazy ones where you go like, huh? And it's just
Yeah.
like it kind of works.
Yeah. And look, unexpected 100%, but also unexpected from my opinion of Mini Cooper getting involved with something like this. Like I'm like, cred to them. It's really cool. You know, we see so many boring car adverts, for
Yeah.
example. So to shake it up, like this is amazing for Rachel and the brand Bestco, but really, really fantastic to see Mini Cooper moving quickly. And this is also off the back of an organic kind of campaign that went viral that they're now realized, oh, this is going to work. So they have a little bit of success, if you will. So that's really great.
Yeah, and look, I'm a big Mini fan. I used to own a Mini like back in the early 2000s, and I loved it. And it's just such a cute, fun car, and it just lends itself really well to this type of partnership, as well. Where I think there's quite a good alignment as well between the TBH Skincare brand and the Mini brand as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, with a bright pink, sparkly Mini cruising the roads.
Yeah, I'd love to see that color app. It would look great.
All right, moving into our last story now. We're going to be talking about Naked Skincare, Naked Sundays, while staying on the skincare vibe, who have recently had to pull their products from the shelves due to more ongoing SPF concerns. And this comes off the back of, now what was the other brand, which Ultraviolet. Ultraviolet, who a couple of weeks ago also had to pull some products off the shelf. So it seems that there's a real thing in the market at the moment of a lot of products which are being launched to market claiming to be SPF 50 plus, which are falling well short of that. Now, is this sort of just like, do you think that this is just like people not really understanding what the standards they need to adhere to? Or do you think it's actually being misrepresenting themselves in the marketplace?
Well, Ultraviolet was big news, like you said, 2 weeks ago. And then Naked Sundays seems to be going a little bit under the radar. I think that's happened in the last, let's say, 48 hours. I don't know. I don't think it's misleading, but I think that the questions deserve to be asked. And I think that they deserve to be asked from the manufacturers. I would have expected that they would, of all products, when it comes to things like medicine, SPF, they need to be held to a really
Mm.
high standard. So I saw there were results around ultraviolet where in some instances it was SPF 4 and in others it was SPF 64. And I think that's the problem and that's why they pulled it, right? It's just crazy variability.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was that the US product actually was SPF 50. So they actually met the standard. So they're actually recalling the Australian product and selling the US product. So again, speaking to the fact that there is that discrepancy, between how things are tested. And I think if anything, when you're in this category, you just need to have much more rigorous controls when it comes to testing your product. That it's not just as simple as like, hey, we've manufactured, some new leggings, we're selling them in the market. Oh, hang on, there's a manufacturing fault. No worries, we'll take it back, we'll fix it, we'll send it back. It's like this can impact people's lives if you're going out there thinking you're putting on SPF 50, but you're not. So I think when you're in this sort of category, you just need to take that extra precaution. And I think there's a lot of brands out there who do take the lead in that and really do focus on making sure they have independent testing, making sure quality control is really tight. But you're kind of playing with fire in this regard, where it's not just something which is fairly innocuous. It's something which can have huge impacts on people's health.
Yeah, yeah. And something like sunscreen, it's a massive trust game. I'm a big fan of both Ultraviolet and Naked Sundays. So I hope this doesn't hurt them. And I'm glad to see some level of proactiveness in this decision as well. This came off the back of independent analysis. They weren't forced to take it off the shelves. They've taken that step early. So look, it's going to hurt their trust. It's also going to hurt their bottom line. There's a lot of products they've had to pull from shelves.
There are, but I think if anything, which history has taught us, that when crises like this happen, this reminds me of like the Tylenol crisis of like the 80s, when someone was found to have.
Tell me what that is, Mal. I've got.
You've never heard of that before. So what happened in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, was that in Chicago, I believe, they found that some batches of Tylenol, which is a painkiller, had been tampered with and were poisoned. So people were dying from it. They were purchasing this Tylenol, which had been spiked. They were taking it. They were then dying. Tylenol responded by actually pulling all the Tylenol off the shelves across the entire USA, destroying them, and then bringing it back out. So they actually went over and above what was actually required, even though they could have very easily identified where it was, the sort of location it happened, and just focused on there. They went over and above that to really make sure that they would be rebuilding trust in the customer. And that became a really great sign, because when things like this happen, when crises happen, you want to overcorrect. You don't want to just do the bare minimum. You really want to overcorrect to continue to earn the trust. Then you want to be upfront with it as well. So then they actually had the CEO go out front and really lead the whole conversation around why they were doing it, how they were taking safety so seriously, and to make sure that this wouldn't happen again. They also then introduced like tamper seals onto all the packaging as well, so people could easily tell if the Tylenol packaging had been tampered with. So all these things were implemented very, very quickly, in addition to taking all the products off the shelves, to ensure that they were able to win back the trust of the customer. So I think this is a great move that, that Naked Sundays have taken such a big step for this, and hopefully it doesn't affect them in the long term, because they are being proactive.
Yeah, and they're disruptors in this space, right? Like they're relatively new brands coming through, trying to take up some of that market share. So don't want to penalize them for that. I think it's great. But quality control at the end of the day, it's the bottom line.
Yep, absolutely. All right, that is all we've got time for this week in e-commerce. Alex, any parting thoughts before you wrap up for the week?
I'm just thinking it's a lot with this post stuff. It's a lot with migrations, Black Friday's coming up. It's always a busy time, but it seems busier than ever, if I'm honest. That's where my head's at.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that. Well, I'm going to be interviewed on the ABC News Radio in an hour, and then I've got another interview with ABC this afternoon on the Australia Post issues, which are all happening. So I've got to go prepare for those.
Is that in real time? Is that live?
In real time. So it'll be at 12:30 Adelaide time for the first one, and then at 5:05 Adelaide time. And I believe the 12:30 is a national show, and the 5:05 is going to be just South Australia.
Brilliant. Well, good luck. Rest your voice. You'll kill it. I know you will.
Thank you very much. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you back here next week for This Week in E-Commerce.
Thanks.